The room was colder than it needed to be. Not because of the concrete walls or the steel bars, but because this was the last place Hope ever entered. The clock above the guard station ticked loudly, each second sounding heavier than the last. In exactly 3 hours, Daniel Cross would be executed for a crime the courts claimed was undeniable. Yet as he sat on the narrow metal bed, hands folded calmly in his lap, there was no panic in his eyes. Only a quiet sadness. Daniel had refused his final meal. He hadn't asked for a priest. He hadn't called any family. When the warden finally stepped inside and asked if there was anything at all he wanted before the sentence was carried out, Daniel lifted his head slowly. "I want to see my dog," he said. The warden frowned. "Your dog. My canine partner. His name is Atlas." The room fell silent. A police dog had never been brought into the execution wing before. Procedures were strict. Emotions were discouraged. But something in Daniel's voice made the warden hesitate. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't fear. It sounded more like unfinished business. Atlas had once been one of the most decorated police dogs in the state. Together, Daniel and Atlas had served for 6 years. Drug seizures, hostage rescues, missing children. They were inseparable. Until one night everything ended. That night, a warehouse raid went wrong. A fellow officer was found dead. Evidence pointed to Daniel. And when Atlas was brought into the courtroom, the dog barked uncontrollably the moment he saw Daniel. The jury didn't need anything else. If the dog accused his own handler, the case was closed. Daniel never defended himself. He simply accepted the verdict. Now, 3 hours before his death, the request was approved. When the heavy door finally opened and Atlas was led inside on a short leash, a murmur rippled through the guards watching behind the glass. The dog had aged. His muzzle was grayer now, his movements slower, but his eyes were the same. Daniel dropped to his knees. "Hey boy," he whispered. But Atlas didn't run to him. Instead the dog froze. His ears lifted. His body stiffened. And then, low and deep, a growl echoed through the room, not at Daniel but at something no one else could see. Years earlier, Daniel Cross had trusted Atlas with his life. The dog wasn't just trained obedience and detection. He was instinct sharpened by loyalty. They trained every morning, rain or shine. Daniel learned to read Atlas's posture the way others read words. A shift of weight meant danger. A pause meant doubt. A bark meant certainty. The warehouse call came in late. Anonymous tip. Possible drug operation. Daniel sensed something was off the moment they arrived. The backup was light. The command rushed. But orders were orders. Inside, chaos erupted fast. Gunfire. Shouting. Smoke. When it was over, Officer Lane lay dead, shot twice. Daniel's weapon was found nearby. The timeline didn't add up, but facts were twisted into something convenient. At the trial, Daniel stayed silent. His lawyer begged him to speak to explain the inconsistencies, but Daniel refused. He knew the system. Once the story was chosen, truth became irrelevant. Then they brought Atlas in. The courtroom leaned forward as the dog was guided past the jury box. When Atlas saw Daniel in shackles, he barked, sharp and loud, again and again. Gasps filled the room. The prosecution smiled. "A trained canine reacting aggressively to his handler," they said. "Animals don't lie." But Daniel understood something no one else did. Atlas wasn't accusing him. He was warning them. Dogs remembered what humans tried to forget. Atlas had smelled something that night. Fear. Blood. Someone else's presence. But no one asked the right questions. They only saw what they wanted. After the conviction, Atlas was retired. Daniel was sent to death row. Years passed in silence. Back in the execution room, Atlas's growl deepened. He stepped closer to Daniel, not attacking but circling. His nose pressed against Daniel's chest, then his shoulder, then suddenly he pulled away and barked sharply toward Daniel's side. One of the guards flinched. "What's wrong with him?" Atlas dropped to the floor and pawed insistently at Daniel's ribs. Daniel's breath caught. "There," he said quietly. "That's where I was hit." The room shifted. A medic was called. They checked Daniel's medical file, a note long ignored. A healed puncture wound. Not from a bullet. From a blade. Atlas sniffed again, then turned, staring directly at the observation glass. His eyes locked onto one man standing there, Lieutenant Harris. The same man who had led the raid. The growl returned, louder than before. Lieutenant Harris stiffened as every eye turned toward him. He laughed uneasily, waving it off. "It's a dog," he said. "You're letting emotions run wild." But Atlas wouldn't stop. He lunged against the leash, barking with precision, not panic. Each bark sharp, deliberate, timed. Daniel had heard that bark before. It meant one thing. Threat identified. The warden ordered everyone to stay still. A second medic examined Daniel more thoroughly. Under the old scar near his ribs they found something else, residue embedded deep in the tissue. Metal fragments inconsistent with standard police ammunition. The room buzzed with tension. One guard whispered, "That means the shot didn't come from his gun." Harris's jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "We're minutes from an execution." Atlas broke free. The leash slipped from the handler's hand and the dog charged, not at Daniel but straight toward Harris. He stopped inches from him, teeth bared, growling so low it vibrated through the floor. Harris reached for his weapon. That was the mistake. Before he could draw, two guards slammed him against the wall. His gun clattered to the ground. In the chaos, Harris shouted, "You don't understand." He was going to expose everything. Silence. The words hung in the air like smoke. Expose what? Under pressure, the story unraveled fast. The warehouse raid wasn't a mistake. It was a setup. Officer Lane had discovered evidence tying Harris to a drug pipeline using police vehicles. That night, Harris confronted Lane. Daniel walked in at the wrong moment. Harris stabbed Daniel during the struggle, shot Lane, and planted the gun. Alice had seen it all. The barking in court wasn't betrayal. It was alarm. Execution protocol was halted immediately. Federal investigators were called. Harris was taken away in cuffs, screaming that none of this would have happened if the dog had just stayed quiet. Atlas returned to Daniel's side and sat, finally calm. Daniel pressed his forehead to the dog's. "You did good," he whispered. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest lifted. But the final outcome still waited beyond those walls. By sunrise, the story had spread beyond the prison. News vans lined the gates. The execution that had been scheduled for dawn was officially canceled. Evidence was re-examined. Testimonies reopened. Within weeks, Daniel Cross was fully exonerated. He walked out of prison a free man, thinner, older, but unbroken. Atlas walked beside him. Outside the gates, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Daniel said nothing. He knelt instead, wrapping his arms around the dog who never gave up on him. Later, during a quiet press conference, Daniel finally spoke. "They say animals don't lie," he said. "But they also don't speak unless someone listens." The department issued apologies. Promotions were quietly reversed. Files sealed for years were reopened. One man lost everything he built on corruption. Another got his life back because of loyalty. Atlas was awarded a commendation for service beyond duty, a rare honor. But Daniel knew the dog didn't care about medals. He cared about truth. Months later, Daniel visited the old training field one last time. Atlas, slower now, still ran with purpose. Daniel smiled, watching him chase memories instead of criminals. Some stories end with justice too late. This one didn't. Because sometimes the last witness standing isn't human. And sometimes, a final wish isn't about saying goodbye. It's about giving the truth one last chance to speak.